Hello everyone. So this is our third video in the series of 40 lectures with respect to revision for upcoming prelims 2025. And as you can see, today's theme is basically an inspiration from previous year's question papers on environment. It's because when you analyze previous year's question paper, one realization that you can actually get is not a single question has been asked from any of these basic textbooks and NCERTs, right? Last year there have been a total of 14 questions asked from environment, and there are 9 questions which are displayed here. The other 5 are also of the same type. You wouldn't actually get the answer for any of the question from the common books that you read, but that doesn't mean that I'm actually suggesting you to stop reading the basic books for environment. No, you read it once or twice, but just understand that in the upcoming year as well, there is a possibility that all the questions can be asked from very contemporary issues, right? Something that's just happening in the environment around you on a daily basis. That can be the area of focus by UPSC. Have that awareness, right? So that tomorrow you don't regret that, and finally you don't have to complain that I read the book and nothing had come from this book as a question. That should not be the case, right? So what type of questions have been asked? All the questions can be compartmentalized into 5 broad types. There are questions which actually are focused about different species. And when you read current affairs compilations, the knowledge that you get is species in news. But UPSC doesn't necessarily have to focus on species in news. UPSC can even ask very common species that are not even in news, like elephants, tigers, lion, right? Whereas cheetah was in news last year because of the cheetah reintroduction program. Elephants or lion, they were not in the news. But UPSC makes that as a question, right? And UPSC can even ask questions out of nowhere, like a question on orangutan, right? Orangutan is not even in India, and there was no threat, a new threat to orangutan in the last year or anything. So orangutan was a species that was not actually in news, right? But this question can be actually got right. I'll tell you how as we move on in the lecture. So the first categorization is questions regarding species, and I would see that just out of these 9 questions, there were at least 3 questions which would fit into this category. One is this. The second question is here we have different types of birds or fish or insects. What are these? Okay, that's the second question. Here we have a question in the match the following format, right? Countries are given and the animals that are found are given. Are they rightly matched or not is the question. And fourth question here is about lions, cheetahs, leopards, all big cats basically, right? So out of these 9 questions, 4 questions were simply from different species. That is only animal species. And here you also have one more question on plant species, right? The question is consider the following plants, and 3 options are given, and how many of the above belong to the pea family, right? So 50% questions in 2024, if not 50, at least 40% questions were simply from the different animal and plant species, right? And these are all species which were not in news, which were not recently in news. Okay, very common species, right? So it means that UPSC is expecting you to have a broad understanding of the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, right? So you may have nothing to do with biology. You may have been a computer engineer, right, having lost all touch with biology, right? But UPSC is expecting you to know, go, understand, start appreciating life beyond human existence, right? So that's why these kind of questions are even being asked. And the other category of questions that are asked can be fit into legal frameworks, either domestic legal frameworks or international legal frameworks. Like for example, last year there were 2 questions asked. One of the question was about Wildlife Protection Act, right? And a particular animal is given, an Indian flying fox is given, and it is asked whether it comes under Wildlife Protection Act or not. So there are only some 4 or 5 Indian laws with respect to wildlife and environment protection. It really makes sense to know a lot about these laws in the first place. Okay, and then another question which actually tests your awareness about an international organization which is in the domain of environment. So that would be the second way of categorizing the questions. So the first way of categorizing questions is questions related to species, not necessarily in news. It could simply be traditional animals and plant forms, right? The second format is about different institutional frameworks, both domestic as well as international frameworks for the purpose of conservation and protection of environment. Alright, and another common way of how questions are asked is with respect to pollutants and chemicals that we normally encounter in our daily lives. We may not even be realizing that we would be ingesting them, correct, causing a lot of deleterious effects to our health, right? So such kind of questions are also asked. Last year this was a question with reference to polyfluoroalkyl substances. This was in news last year because these were what are called as forever chemicals. They don't degrade at all. They continue to remain persistent in the environment. So that is the nature of question. So this type of question would fit into the category of pollutants and miscellaneous associated areas, right? And then other types of questions asked would be on habitats and ecosystem. We have different types of ecosystem in India, right? We have desert ecosystem, we have mangroves ecosystem, right? So each ecosystem would have a certain specific characteristic to it, right? So questions can be asked testing whether you are aware of the features of the ecosystem and what are the threats to this ecosystem and what conservation methods are being adopted to preserve and conserve those ecosystems. So such kind of questions can also be asked. All right, so let's just have a sample question here. This was a question asked in 2023 prelims. This is a question on species, right? Look at the question. Which one of the following makes a tool with a stick to scrape insects from a hole in a tree or a log of wood? And 4 options are given: fishing cat, orangutan, otter and sloth bear, right? Prima facie, when you look at it, it may appear as if UPSC is expecting you to know in detail about each and every animal species, which is actually not the case. You, after all, you need to know that orangutan falls into a category called as primates, right? Orangutan belongs to the order called as primate. Order is a biological taxonomy, right? It's a way of classifying animals. So human beings, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, monkeys, lorises, all of us, we are related to each other, right? We are more closely related to each other. So all of us, we are put into one category called as order, right? If only you are aware that orangutan falls into the same order in which human beings come under, you will be able to understand the characteristics of this order called as primates, right? All of us, we have certain characteristics. What is that? We have a larger brain size. Okay, the weight of our brain to the ratio as a ratio to the weight of our body is actually higher for primates, right? You take the case of slender loris. It's such a tiny organism. It weighs around half a kg or quarter kg, right? But it has a bigger head. It has a larger brain. All primates, for the size of its body, the size of the brain is actually, it's on the higher side. And not just that, the primates, they have what is called as binocular vision, right? Both the eyes will only see at one object at the same time. Whereas you take the case of deer, right? One of the eye may be looking at some other field of view, the other eye may have a completely different field of view, right? So nature has created certain animals with certain traits, and for primates, we are all created with binocular vision. Why? We need to perceive depth. Why? Because most of these primates, including human beings, right, our common ancestor, they were all tree living creatures. That's what is called as arboreal creatures. ARBOREAL. Arboreal means tree living. Okay, so when you are tree living, when you have to swing from one branch to the other, you need to have a clear sense of depth. You need to have a clear sense of distance, and to have a clear sense of distance, you need what is called as the stereoscopic vision or the binocular vision, right? You close one of your eye, you cannot actually perceive at what distance an object is. You only broadly know that there is an object. Okay, but when you have both the eyes open, that is when you can have a clear perception of depth. Why do you think in shooting competitions, right, shooters, they close one eye and they aim with one eye? Because when you're in a shooting competition, you don't need depth, you only need position. For positioning, monoocular vision is fine, but to perceive depth, to know distancing, okay, when you have to drive a car, you cannot drive with one eye closed because you do not know the distance between one car and the other. You will end up having an accident, right? So it's a necessity of binocular vision which helps in survival in aerial condition, in arboreal conditions, on tree conditions, as a result of which binocular vision has developed for all of us, for primates. Color vision as well, right? Maybe for higher order primates like humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, we have color vision, whereas slender loris, the first primate to evolve, does not have color vision because it's completely a nocturnal creature. Whereas human beings, animals, monkeys, we are diurnal. We work both in the night as well as in the morning. So to work in the morning, right, when we catch berries and when we eat, so we need to have a clear sense of color, whereas slender loris is completely nocturnal, so it doesn't really need color, right? So what I'm trying to say is all these primates have certain common traits, okay, and one of the common trait, just like how we have binocular vision, just like how we have a larger brain size, one of the common vision is the dexterity with our fingers, right? The tremendous dexterity with what all axis we can move our thumb, we can move our fingers. This is also something common across the different primates, right? Of course the degree varies. Human beings, the highest dexterity, next followed by the chimpanzees, next followed by orangutans. Lowest will be the slender loris, but even slender loris will have extremely fine grip with which it can climb on trees, right? A dog or a cat cannot do that. Even a tiger doesn't grip, right? It doesn't have that what can be called as, this is called as a pincer grip, right? A very precise fine grip. With the help of thumb and finger, you're able to hold any object with the right amount of pressure being imparted, right? So this capacity is something that's unique to primates, and no wonder we primates can hold objects, we can make tools out of anything, we can fashion weapons out of anything. That's exactly what the question is. The question is, which of the following makes a tool, right? So that is a capacity which is limited only to the primates. So it's not necessary that you have to go and remember each and every one of the option, and you should know the traits and characteristics of every being here, right? All that you needed to know was the order called as primates. So that's why our entire environment discussion classes from now onwards will go in this fashion, where we will have a total of 6 sessions on environment and 6 alternate Mondays, and in all the 6 alternate Mondays we will take up, when we discuss about species, we will take up the discussion of one particular order. So for example, in today's session we'll take up the discussion of the order of primates. Probably in the next session we'll take up the discussion of the order of carnivores, right? Maybe marsupials in the next class. So assuming that in 6 sessions we'll at least be able to cover some 10 different order. For example, look at this question, question number 18. Consider the following. There are 5 different species given, right? All these 5 belong to the same order, okay? So it would all come under the category of what is called as arthropoda, okay? So they all have a certain common characteristic to them, right? So if we can only club animals into similar orders, we'll be able to arrive at similarities between them a lot. So that will help you in forming better connections. For example, when a question is given, lions do not have particular breeding season. Unlike most big cats, cheetahs do not roar. Unlike male lions, male leopards do not proclaim their territory by scent marking, right? You see, actually the question itself is like making a comparison between members of the same order. So when you are able to arrive at the general characteristics of a particular order, you will be able to make fine differentiation between individual species, right? So that's why it's necessary that you need to know what is an order, what are all the other fellow members of the same order, and only then you will be able to make individual comparisons and differences, hoping that something that you learn in this manner will be helpful for you on the day of this examination, right? So what we have here are 3 questions which I have framed, right? Maybe you can pause this video for a second, for a minute, okay? You can pause this video and have a look at these 3 questions, right? So that you can take your own time and you can think on these questions, okay? So towards the end of this discussion, you will find that you would have got an answer for all these questions, okay? I hope you have paused and you have had a good look at the question. So let's proceed further with our discussion. So in order to take this discussion forward, I have to introduce a concept called as evolution to you, right? Evolution is basically a function of 2 different factors. One is a natural factor of genetic mutation. The other is the factor of climatic conditions, right? It is these two factors which will decide who lives and who dies, right? First, what is genetic mutation? Genetic mutation is basically nature's way of preserving a particular species. So today we human beings, every offspring that we produce is a mutation, right? We don't actually produce ditto copy paste of each other's genetic pool, right? There is a slight variation created with every individual being born. Why? So that over a period of time good amount of difference is created, so that even if there is one disease that attacks us, we don't end up getting completely wiped out. You need to have a good amount of genetic differentiation to perpetuate your race, right? So nature has its way of creating such genetic mutations on an ongoing basis, right? Let me give a simple example. Today we are human beings, and amongst us lives people who are very, very short, who we call as dwarfs, right? 2 feet tall, right? Let's say we have bigger tall human beings, and we also have the shorter dwarf. Let's assume that tomorrow some great climatic change happens, okay? Some unexplainable change happens, as a result of which all the oxygen in the atmosphere gets attracted to the ground level. So basically oxygen is only here up to this level. Beyond this there is no oxygen, right? Imagine if this happens. Now what happens is, all the normal human beings, we are all now at a disadvantage. We can only lie down, we cannot do any work. If we stand up, we'll start getting suffocated. But who is at an advantage now? All the dwarfs, right? So in such a new climatic condition, they are the ones who will be the fittest. We human beings will die away. Just because we are tall, we are well built, we are stronger than the dwarfs, doesn't mean nature will select you over the dwarfs, right? So this is how, what would have happened is, there could have been a common ancestor once upon a time. Let's name him as X, right? So X is similar to this normal tall human being, and out of this X comes a lot of genetic mutations, as a result of which some tiny members are all formed, okay? So let's say X is 50 kgs. This tiny members, the genetic mutation out of which they were born, let's say they are all 5 kgs, right? What if the climatic conditions becomes appropriate enough that only these members can survive easily, while these numbers keeps on decreasing, numbers keeps on decreasing. People who are in this X population, they keep on dying out one after the other, whereas this number keeps on increasing, right? Imagine a similar context as I told you. What if the climate proves to be advantageous for the genetic mutants alone, right? That's the case how a new group arises out of an old ancestor, and this new group now survives as a distinct branch. That is how the first cousin of ours, the earliest cousins of human beings, who can be called as the loris, emerged 40 million years ago. Okay, to provide this in the context, let me tell you, we human beings, Homo sapiens, we are just 0.2 million years old. Okay, so lorises have existed long before us. Okay, Homo sapiens are just 2 lakh years old. We are now older than that, right? So what I am trying to say is, favorable genetic mutations favorable to lorises have ensured that their branches have continued to stay alive till today, whereas this common ancestor, now his number keeps on decreasing because of unfavorable climatic condition, but still he is continuing, and in the process still there is a lot of mutations being produced, and those mutations are going to result in the next group called as the monkeys, right? So monkeys come into existence somewhere around 35 million years ago out of this common ancestor, right? Now monkeys have found the place hospitable. Monkeys are able to continue breeding, they are able to get their food, they are able to continue till today, right? Same, this ancestor now continues to live, undergoes mutation. This is how every new species is born out of this common ancestor, and the last new species to come out of this common ancestor would be human beings, right? And probably we human beings could have killed this common ancestor in a competition for resources, because we are better at organizing, we are better at forming teams, we are better at shaping weapons, right? So evolution would have given us this cognitive advantage, as a result of which we could have simply killed all the common ancestors. Anything could have happened, or the common ancestor could have died because of climate change or whatever it is, because we don't see any other species apart from human beings existing today, right? So that is why we are sure that the common ancestor has just given way to the last Homo sapiens, right? So what I am trying to say is, all these primates, all of us, we have arrived from a common ancestor as a result of genetic mutations which will be chosen by nature to allow we continue to exist, right? So since we all come from the common ancestor, that's why we share a lot of similarities with each other, and no wonder why we are all called as one order of living beings. Similarly, whatever we call as carnivores as one order, they all have very similar characteristics. Marsupials as one order, they all will have similar characteristics. In fact, we are so closely related to chimpanzee that 99% of our DNA between chimps and human beings are very similar. There isn't any difference between us, right? So I hope you have got an idea of what an order is, right? An order is a collection of animal species or plant species, right? All members of these different species, they have very common traits across each other, connecting to each other, right? Because you cannot say that human beings and dogs are more similar. No, human beings and gorillas are more similar. Though human beings also have mammary glands, we have breasts with which we feed the offspring. Dogs also have mammary glands, cats also have mammary glands, right? But the behavior traits, size of the brain, the cognition that human beings and chimps have, they are all closely related. Okay, so dogs also are related to human beings in some ways. How? Because they also give birth to offsprings, and after giving birth to offsprings, they milk their offsprings. So in such ways, human beings are also similar, but not as similar between chimpanzee and human beings. That's why when the similarities are so close, we call them as order, right? But we understand that dogs are also mammals, human beings are also mammals, because both of us have mammary glands, milk producing glands, right? So that's why we would categorize dogs, human beings, chimps, lorises all under one category called as mammalia, right? So you can imagine it like this. The best way to imagine this is, order is a set, okay? Order is a set which is a subset of mammals. Mammals are also another big subset of what is called as chordata. Chordata means those animals with vertebra, with a vertebral column. Even fishes are chordata. Fishes have vertebra, right? Lizards are vertebra. Lizards are also chordata because they also have vertebra. But lizards don't have mammary glands. So that's why lizards cannot be brought under the category of mammalia. Though lizards are also members of chordata, but lizards wouldn't come under mammalia because they don't have mammary glands. So they are kept in a different class called as reptilia, right? And so this is how taxonomy works. Taxonomy is basically classification and assigning names for different species, okay, and establishing relationships between different animal species, right? So just understand that human beings are all a part of the same order, what we call as primates. So we are bound to exhibit common traits between each other. Now with this knowledge in place, let's move forward. So the first primate that we will be discussing today would be Slender loris. Slender loris as well as hoolock gibbons, right, both of which will be discussed today. I really expected questions to be asked from both these topics in the last two prelims, but questions haven't been asked. So there is a high possibility of questions being asked from either of these topics or even from both the topics in the upcoming year. Why? Because Slender loris was in news 2 years back because a separate wildlife sanctuary was created in Tamil Nadu in the district of Karur in hills called as Kadavur, right? So a separate Slender loris sanctuary was created because the creature is so endangered. It's at risk from so much of human activities. That's why there was a very, very strong need to protect slender loris, and no wonder a sanctuary was even set up. But no questions have been asked till date, right? But last year a question was asked about orangutan. Maybe that is UPSC's way of connecting a similar primate and asking a question, right? And last year there was also constantly Manipur being in news, and the only ape that you can find in India, right? Apes are the later evolutionary byproducts of this common ancestor. The first evolutionary byproduct was loris, followed by the monkeys, then followed by the apes. The difference between apes and monkeys is that apes don't have tails. Chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas, you see, they don't have tails, right? So similarly, among the different apes, the only ape form to evolve in India was hoolock gibbon, which is found today in the northeast, right? So this is hoolock gibbon. It's found in the northeastern states, in Assam, in Mizoram, in Manipur. That is the area where you actually find hoolock gibbon, and this is the only ape variety. There are no gorillas endemic to India. There are no chimpanzees. There are no orangutans endemic to India. It's only hoolock gibbon which is endemic to India. So I was really expecting a question last year, not asked. Probably can be asked this year, right? So that's why we need to make a good study of all these different types of apes, right? So starting with slender loris. So slender loris is a very, very small animal. Okay, small primate which has no tail, which is mainly nocturnal, which is very shy, which tries to avoid human interactions as much as possible. And where would you find slender loris? It has a habitat in India, right? So slender loris in India, it can be found in Kerala and coastal parts of Karnataka. Okay, these are parts of Western Ghats, Karnataka and Kerala, where rainfall is very high. Okay, so there are two types of slender loris that you find in India. One, what is called as the Malabar slender loris, the other one which is called as the Mysore slender loris. So Malabar slender loris lives in tropical wet rainforest areas. You see, this is slender loris habitat. This is the different forests that you find in India. So in the very greenish area, right? So these are tropical rainforest. There you have the Malabar slender loris surviving and thriving well, right? And then the other variety, the Mysore slender loris, you find it in tropical dry forests. Okay, these areas don't get as much rainfall as the Western Ghats, so the nature of vegetation is also dry forests, what you find here. And not only that, there are then parts of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh which are extremely dry. Not like desert conditions, but where the annual rainfall is very, very less. Okay, so in extremely dry conditions as well, you find all these are pockets of slender loris habitation sites, right? So you can say that a slender loris is found in rainforests, dry forests, as well as in scrub, thorny scrub areas, right? Slender loris will not be found in desert areas. Okay, because slender loris needs a good canopy of trees. It needs a dense canopy so that it can just jump from one canopy to the other. Not jump, actually slowly move from one canopy to the other, right? Unlike monkeys, okay, slender loris, unlike gibbons, gibbons can easily jump from one branch to the other. Slender loris, they are very slow moving creatures, right? They cannot simply make swift jumps or anything. They are slow moving. That's why they become easy prey to the predators if at all they were to move in the daytime. And no wonder slender loris is a nocturnal creature. Okay, it doesn't come out in the daytime. It's only when there is no threat of any other preying animals, that is when slender loris comes out in the night time, right? And what does it feed upon? It feeds upon fruits, berries, right? And it preys upon eggs of various insects. So it is omnivorous. It eats fruits, berries, as well as it also preys upon insects, all parts of insects, small insects, right? So it's a omnivorous animal, slender loris, right? And usually it gives birth to one offspring at a time, but there are also occasions where even twins have been known to be born to slender loris, right? And its greatest threat is from human beings. It's because there is a misconception about slender loris. It is supposed to bring ill luck. Okay, it's seen as a sign of bad omen, especially when women are pregnant and when they happen to come across a slender loris. In parts of Tamil Nadu, it is considered to be a sign of ill luck. So it was hunted for a very long time without people realizing its ecological importance. Slender loris is very good in controlling pests in farmlands, right? But people used to just hunt it down. Okay, so it's only now a lot of awareness has started coming because of the initiatives taken by the government, and moreover, it's now placed under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act, as a result of which poaching or killing it, hunting, it's all a serious crime, correct? Because of its endangered status, government has taken steps to bring it under a protected list under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act, right? So these are all some of the important traits and behavior of slender loris. Okay, so what you need to know here is that it is found not only in protected areas. Kadavur Wildlife Sanctuary, of course, it is a protected area, but even in various other parts, like even in the cities of Bangalore, it is possible to find slender loris. Wherever you have good parks, you have good canopy of trees, right? In the night time, you will be able to spot slender loris, because daytime you cannot see anything. Okay, so the first statement, slender loris is found in India only in protected areas, is actually incorrect. Not only in protected areas, but even in urban habitats, you have slender loris. Seshachalam Biosphere Reserve houses red slender loris. It's actually incorrect. The reason is because there are two varieties, subspecies of slender loris. One is the grey slender loris. The other one is the red slender loris. Red slender loris is found only in Sri Lanka, right? The image that you have here is grey slender loris. You see the top part of the slender loris, it's greyish in color. Whereas in Sri Lanka, you have both the varieties, grey as well as the red one. In India, what you have is only the grey slender loris. Okay, so the second statement is wrong. If only it was given, it houses grey slender loris, in this case, the answer is right, because Seshachalam Biosphere Reserve is located here. Okay, it is located in Andhra Pradesh, and it is located within the habitation area of slender loris, grey slender loris, right? So this statement, that is why it is wrong as of now. It is found in thorny scrub forest. It's a correct statement. So only one would be the right statement for this particular question. All right. So now look at the question that I have framed here. The mammal shares its habitat with hedgehogs, grizzled giant squirrels, and bonnet macaques. Bonnet macaques is nothing but common monkeys. It is arboreal, that is tree living, and nocturnal, right? So this alone should have made you realize that it cannot be nilgai, it cannot be hangul, right? Nilgai and hangul, these are deer type of animals, so they cannot be tree living, they cannot be arboreal. You should be able to eliminate A and B out of this. So leaves you with C as well as D. Slender loris is nocturnal, whereas hoolock gibbon, just like any other gibbons, is diurnal, right? It comes out, it's active in both daytime as well as nighttime, right? So for this question, the right answer would be slender loris, right? So this is all about slender loris. Now we move on. Hoolock gibbons. As I told you, this is the only ape variety found in India. Okay, and look at the size, length of its arms. Its limbs are very tall, very well developed, right? And it has a very strong wrist, very long fingers, as a result of which brachiation is possible. What is this phenomenon called brachiation? Basically, it's a phenomenon where monkeys or gibbons, they just swing in one arm, right? With one arm, they are able to support their entire weight, swing comfortably over a branch, and then use the other arm to grasp the next branch and move on, right? So it requires very good dexterity with your arm, it requires good gripping capacity, okay, and it requires good strength in your arms. All of these are there with hoolock gibbons. So that is the word brachiation. Tomorrow this could be asked in your examination, right? The organism exhibits brachiation, and you should not be confused about what is it, right? And hoolock gibbons are also arboreal, they are also tree living. They rarely become terrestrial, they don't even come to the grounds, right? And hoolock gibbons are what is called as dichromatic. What it means is there is a clear color differentiation between males and females. Males are always black in color, females are always brown in color. Both males and females, they have white shaded eyebrows, right? And a very peculiar characteristic of these hoolock gibbons are that they are very monogamous, right? It's like a male chooses a female and they live as a family throughout their life. In captivity, hoolock gibbons, they usually have a lifespan of around 25 years, in the wild, and when they are captured and kept in a zoo or preserved, their lifespan automatically increases to up to 40 years as well, right? And mating happens once in 2 years, and the pregnancy period lasts for about 180 days, around 6 months is the pregnancy period. The number of calves usually delivered, offspring delivered in one pregnancy is just 1, right? So these are the important features that can be asked with respect to hoolock gibbons. And another important aspect that you should know about hoolock gibbons is they make great vocalizations, right? The sounds that are emitted by gibbons is again a trait of primates. Primates are capable of greater vocalizations, greater frequencies can be emitted, greater modifications of voice can be done. Gorillas can utter 20 different types of vocalizations, right? All this is because of cognitive development associated with primates. It's because of our bigger brain size compared to our body size, right? As a result of which our cognitive development of entire primate order itself is on the higher side, and it is reflected in the form of the variations that can be created in the sounds that are emitted by these primates. And hoolock gibbons calls are very interesting to hear. It's a series of notes which goes on with accelerating speed and then slowly it decelerates, right? So it's a real treat to hear. If you are free, you can try it out on YouTube and see how hoolock gibbons calls sound like, right? So this is the only ape variety found in India, and this is another primate which is of importance to us. And hoolock gibbon as well is also an endangered species, right? And what are the threats that are faced by hoolock gibbons? Basically human development efforts, right? In Assam, you have a train track which actually goes in between a hoolock forest, right? As a result of which the canopy is just gone in between, right? You have trees, canopy, dense canopy at the top, and then you have vacant land over which train goes, and then another forested area where you have dense canopy. And it has been found that the gibbons are not making the crossing. The gibbons are actually scared to make crossing. So artificial bridges have also been constructed by the forest department, but still the hoolock gibbons are not ready to cross. So any such developmental activities, what it does is it just simply fragments the habitat of hoolock gibbons. It's like you are now creating a competition for hoolock gibbons for resources within a small piece of land. Earlier the gibbons can just move widely. Now you are creating enmity between the hoolock gibbons, right? Because you are fragmenting their territory. All of them get confined to a small area. Now there is a stress that is created within the community of the gibbons, right? So human activity is definitely one, and even laying electric high power lines, right? Many hoolock gibbons, they tend to get electrocuted. Okay, so these are some of the threats that are faced by hoolock gibbons. As of now, as per the IUCN list, both slender loris and hoolock gibbons are under the endangered species list. Right. So what about the global scenario? The global scenario is that in Africa and in Southeast Asia, you still have a few more ape varieties. In Southeast Asia, in Indonesia and in parts of Malaysia, you have orangutans, which are brown haired apes, right? And in Africa, in the Central Africa as well as in the West Africa, Uganda is the only East African country where you still have ape varieties. Leaving Uganda aside, right, all other Central African countries you have apes, and on the West African coastal countries of West Africa you still have some apes. What are those apes? You have chimpanzees, you have gorillas, and you have bonobos. Bonobo is exclusively confined to Democratic Republic of Congo. So that's the only country in this world where bonobos are found, whereas chimpanzees and gorilla are widely distributed across all the other countries, right? You have Cameroon here, you have Gabon here, you have Central African Republic here, you have just Congo as another country here. So in all these Central African countries, and this is Uganda, right? So we have a fair distribution of chimpanzees as well as gorillas, but bonobos only concentrated in Democratic Republic of Congo, right? And here you have Cote d'Ivoire. Okay, so these are some of the West African countries as well where you have ape varieties. All right. So if you look at a previous year question, for example, the question asked in 2024, question number 23, 3 countries are given: Brazil, Indonesia, Madagascar, and 3 animals are given: Indri, elk, bonobo, right? So look at the pair matched. Madagascar is matched with bonobo. Okay, the only way you could have got this answer right is if you have thought that UPSC is giving focus for primates, let me prepare more on primates, and then you would have known that there are only these many number of primates. You have the gibbons, you have chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos, orangutans. You know where orangutan is located, you know where bonobo is located, you know chimpanzee and gorilla widely distributed across all different Central African and West African countries. Hoolock gibbon only in India, right? With this knowledge you could have faced these kind of questions. Alright, so we move on to the next topic. So the next topic that we will be discussing is the impact of EVs. The reason is because electric vehicles are really promoted as a very great alternative for fossil fuels. It's generally said that EVs leave very less environmental footprint, right? So we need to really think, is it all justified or not? Okay, and moreover, the topic of electric vehicles is becoming a favorite of UPSC year after year. One year they asked about the science and technology behind EV. Last year there was a question asked about where do you find cobalt, right? The greatest reserves of cobalt are located in Democratic Republic of Congo was the answer. So that was the question asked last year. So EVs are just the fashion of the day. So generally there is more possibilities of questions revolving around the EVs. And another subject where EVs can be relevant is environment. So let's just have some understanding about the impact of EV on environment, right? So when it comes to electric vehicles, the main culprit here is with respect to this energy storage system, which is nothing but the lithium-ion battery system, right? So for manufacturing a lithium-ion battery, apart from the usual metals like aluminum, iron, carbon, the exotic metals, the specific metals that you actually need are lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, right? Particularly lithium and cobalt, right? So where do you get lithium? Lithium reserves are available in South America. They are there in US, they are there in Australia as well as in China, right? So these are some of the largest reserves that you find on Earth. And then when it comes to cobalt, 70% of the world's reserve is there in Democratic Republic of Congo. And in addition to that, there are also countries like Canada, which also have some amount of cobalt. Russia also has some amount of cobalt. Various other countries also has, but nothing on the same league as that of Democratic Republic of Congo, right? So these are the pockets where you find concentration of lithium and cobalt. So how is lithium first of all formed and where is it extracted from? Let's say the case of South America. In South America, lithium is basically formed because of leaching of volcanic rocks, right? So these are mountains, right? Just think of this as a mountain which has lithium content in it because of volcanic eruption, right? So the mountains which are formed by volcanic deposits have lithium content. Now because of drainage, because of rainfall, what happens is water leaches in, water infiltrates the rocks, it leaches the lithium, it brings it to the groundwater table and keeps it below the ground as a brine solution, brine, B-R-I-N-E, right? It's basically water which is fully concentrated with lithium salt. That's what is called as brine, right? So this brine solution is actually located underneath, under the ground, right? Whereas on the ground you may have, basically in the South American region you can see that you have a lot of hills everywhere, mountainous ranges everywhere, and streams from all these mountains will flow and they will all converge into one single lake. This kind of a drainage system in geography, it's what is called as endorrheic drainage system. Okay, endorrheic drainage, where surface runoff from all the hills, from all directions, it all gets concentrated in the form of a central water body, right? A lake is formed. So is lithium there in this water? No. Lithium is there under the ground surrounding this lake, everywhere in all these areas, right? You have lithium which is in underground as a brine solution. So then how is lithium extracted? Basically drilling is done and the brine solution is actually pumped out. It is pumped out and it is poured into these kind of what is called as pans, salt pans, right? You go to Tuticorin district of Tamil Nadu, you have salt pans. Basically you have flat lands near the coast where you extract seawater, you pump in seawater into those salt pans and you allow the seawater to evaporate. Slowly crystallization will happen and sodium chloride salts will be formed. That is the same method through which lithium is also formed, right? So lithium is formed, it is extracted from brine solution because of slow crystallization process as a result of evaporation, right? This is actually happening in Atacama desert region. It's a very arid region and moreover all the water, it just comes and stagnates in a single place underground. Imagine if it was a river like Ganga or Kaveri or Yamuna, if the water keeps on flowing at a high pace, entire lithium would have been just simply washed away. It would have been taken and it would have just been mixed with the sea or the ocean, right? But here, since you have an endorheic form of drainage, there is no outlet. All the streams have to come and settle in one place, as a result of which the entire lithium which is concentrated in the rocks is all leached, it's all brought and concentrated in a particular area, right? So that area in Atacama is what is called as Salar de Atacama. So it is in this place, Salar de Atacama, where you have very good concentration, very good exploitable amounts of lithium brine resources available. So mining companies, they go there, they make a drilling into the ground, they take the brine, pump it into these salt pans, and it takes around 10 months to 1 year for slow evaporation to happen. It's not like in one day you heat it, immediately you get lithium. No. First they put it in one pan, after water evaporates to a certain extent, concentration increases. Now it is taken to another salt pan, put over there. So stage by stage it takes around 10 months to 1 year for this brine to be completely converted into a lithium salt, right? So what is this problem associated with this lithium extraction process? The only problem here is intensive groundwater depletion, right? It's because just to produce 1 ton of lithium you need at least around 20 lakh liters of water, right? Sorry, 20 million liters of water, right? So you take the entire brine from underground and you keep evaporating it and it doesn't even come back as rainfall, right? Why does it not come back as rainfall? It's because it's an arid area, so whatever evaporates just goes away. The rate of evaporation is so fast, right? So the groundwater is very fast depleted. The local communities in and around these lithium salt pans, right, they have already started facing chronic shortage of water. And not only that, once the land has been used for lithium salt formation, this land cannot be reutilized for any other agricultural purposes or for any other purposes, right? The land becomes unfit for any other cultivation and agricultural purposes, right? So this is the impact with respect to lithium extraction. When it comes to cobalt mining, the dangers are even more serious, and that too these dangers are going to happen in a third world country like Africa, in like Democratic Republic of Congo, where there is very least regard for life and dignity and all of that, right? So what happens in cobalt extraction? So cobalt is formed, it is found as sulfide ores, right? So what happens is it's a bluish metal, and moreover UPSC can even ask questions like this. They need not actually ask questions on cobalt mining, but they may ask you questions on various minerals that human body requires, and one of the option could be something like this: trace amounts of cobalt can be toxic to human beings. The answer is wrong. It's because cobalt is a very essential mineral for human body. You need cobalt, which is the reason why you can get vitamin B12 in your body, right? Without cobalt you cannot get vitamin B12, and which is very necessary for vital metabolic activities. So cobalt in less quantities In suitable quantities, it is desirable for the human body, but in excess quantities, it becomes toxic and damaging to human body, right? So, in those places in Democratic Republic of Congo, where cobalt is mined, the mine workers, they seem to experience a lot of respiratory problems, because cobalt gets inside the body as fine dust, as a result of which it irritates the respiratory passage, and moreover, the lungs of those mine workers, it gets completely destroyed, and a disease called as hard metal lung disease is formed, which is basically a form of pneumonia, right? So breathlessness, shortage of breath, cough, and finally they die, right? So such kind of respiratory illness forms as a result of exposure to cobalt dust. This is at the mine site, right? And cobalt is then processed, because cobalt ore has so much other impurities. It has other metals like lead, arsenic, nickel, copper. All other metals are also mixed with cobalt ore, right? So that's why you need to extract everything else and take out only the cobalt. So it has to be processed in refineries, right? So once the cobalt ore is processed, this image here is the dust which finally is left behind. This residue is what is called as the tailings, right? So tailings is the end byproduct after cobalt extraction, and it is in these tailings now a problem arises. What is that? These tailings, they still contain heavy metals like arsenic, lead, nickel, cadmium. All those metals are still there in small trace quantities. Why? Because the entire extraction process was only focused on extracting cobalt. It was not focused on extracting other small amounts of other elements. It's not designed for extraction of other heavy metals. So it has heavy metals. In addition to that, there are also a lot of other sulfides which are still there in these tailings. Now what happens is, if these tailings are not preserved properly, if they are not stored as per the norms correctly, if they come into contact with water body, you see here there is a water body here. On coming into contact with water body, sulfuric acid is formed, and this sulfuric acid will leach the heavy metals like lead, arsenic, cadmium. All of these will be leached out of the tailings, right? Now the water is full of heavy metals, and it is this water which goes and drains into water bodies like ponds, wells, rivers, streams, as a result of which the entire aquatic life is destroyed. And people who tend to consume this water over a prolonged period of time, they get all dangerous diseases, neurological defects, all problems are created, and children born with birth defects, all these happens as a result of these tailings. So cobalt mining creates its own set of respiratory problems, because when cobalt mining takes place, the cobalt ore is transported in big trucks, right? And when these trucks, each weighing 100 tons, 150 tons, when they go on village roads, and just think of the entire area as having a lot of cobalt everywhere. So even the roads are also nothing but cobalt rocks, right? So when the lorries, when the trucks keeps on conveying on the roads again and again, there is a lot of micro grinding that takes place between the tire and between the rocks, again emitting a lot of cobalt dust, right? So it's a very natural, it's a very common scenario in most mining towns. You go to Jaria coal fields, see that town how it is, or you go to Kendujar district of Odisha, that's where a lot of iron mining takes place. You'll be surprised that entire houses, entire plants, leaves, vegetation, water bodies, everything will be covered with a small thin layer of iron dust, right? Same is the case in Congo, where cobalt dust just spreads across everywhere, right? It's all associated with mining activities, and that leads to respiratory problems. So in terms of cobalt mining also, it is severely degrading to the environment as well as to the people. And even when it comes to processing as well, cobalt processing is equally damaging to the environment and to the community, right? And when it comes to end of the life, let's say the lithium-ion battery has reached its end life, it has been completely exhausted, is utilized, now is the time to dispose it off. Usually in India or in many other parts of the world, recycling is not done properly. It's because recycling does not really is profitable these days. Maybe when technology improves in the future, when the amount of metals that can be extracted out of a used lithium-ion battery goes high, one day it could become profitable, but as of now it's not really profitable, and so that is why lithium-ion batteries are simply discarded in landfills. they are just simply disposed of, right? And when they are in the landfills, if they catch fire, a lot of noxious gases like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, right, greenhouse gases are all emitted as a result of that, right? And if at all they don't burn, or let's say if acid formation takes place in the landfills, as a result of which leaching of lithium-ion battery happens, just think what all metals get leached. What is the physical setup of a lithium-ion battery? You have an outer casing. The outer casing can be made of aluminum or it can be made of steel, right? That's how a lithium battery's outer casing is. And then you have a positive electrode. The positive electrode is made of oxides of these metals like manganese, cobalt, lithium, nickel, right? Metal oxides are the positive electrode, the cathode. And the negative electrode is basically, it's graphite, it's nanocarbon graphite, which is the negative electrode, right? You see here, it's C means carbon. Carbon is the anode here. And what type of carbon do we use? Nanocarbon, right? And then you have electrolytes, which are dangerous chemicals, right? And when it comes to terminal connectors, you have copper connectors, right? So these are all the different chemicals that you find in a battery, right? As a result of explosion or as a result of catching fire, sulfur which is there in these electrolytes, right? So it forms sulfur oxides, it forms nitrogen oxides, okay? It emits greenhouse gases. And if at all leaching takes place, aluminum, iron which is there in steel, all these kind of leaching, it adds these metals to the water table, right? So trace amounts of aluminum, iron will all be consumed by the people in and around the landfills, okay? So understand that these are the metals which are there in a lithium-ion battery, and it is only these which can cause problems. For example, carbon, right, which is there in the anode, which is a nanocarbon, which is small, very microscopic powdered carbon. Okay, when such powder particles, when people inhale, it's very, very toxic to both human as well as for wildlife, right? So respiratory problems can be created as a result of the carbon in it. Digestive problems can be created as a result of consuming water which is leached with aluminum and iron. Respiratory problems again can be created because of oxides, gases of sulfur and nitrogen, right? But one thing that we are very certain is there is no pollution of lead or arsenic or mercury. This pollution is not present because these elements are not even there in the battery, right? So these are all ways how UPSC can frame tricky questions, and it can question, it can challenge you, right? Let's say this is the second question. The question says, which of the following pollutants are released in the landfills where lithium batteries are disposed improperly, right? Uranium is a radioactive material. Why would it even come to the sites where lithium-ion battery is disposed? It's not relevant. Mercury is not there, arsenic is also not there, only sulfur oxides is there. So one only is the right answer, right? See, if you do not have adequate knowledge about battery chemistry, okay, if you do not know about the battery structure, you will be very tempted to feel that, oh yeah, battery, everything will be there, everything that is damaging to human beings will all be there, and you will simply go for an option which just doesn't have uranium. You may think that 1, 2, 4, all these are right, correct? But it is not the case. You need specific knowledge, right? The minute you know that this is what is there in a lithium-ion battery, then you will not make a mistake by choosing all these options, right? So this brings us to the last topic for discussion, which is basically a factual discussion on the latest report published by the Indian government on the state of forests in India for the year 2023, right? So let's just have a look at that. So now we come to the last point of our discussion. This is just an update on the latest report published by the Ministry of Environment and Forests, which gives us an update about the total quantum of forest cover, tree cover in India, right? So in today's discussion we will just have a highlight of 3 chapters of the report: chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. Chapter 2 is about forest cover, chapter 3 is about mangrove cover, chapter 4 is about forest fires, right? So let me just summarize it all, just extracting the most useful data for the purpose of exam, right? So first of all, how do we classify a particular area as a forest? The criteria is actually given in Kyoto Protocol of 1997, right, in which how do you measure forest? There has to be some criteria, some classification. So you take an area of 1 hectare, right? The area should be 1 hectare, and in this area of 1 hectare, at least minimum 10% of the land should have a green canopy. When you see it, observe it from a satellite, it should be greenish. Minimum 10%, maximum it can go up to anything, right? And this green cover should be as a result of trees which are more than 2 meters tall. You cannot say that I have a football ground and in football ground I have a lawn of grasses, so when you look from top, even that also looks green, but that does not come under the category of forests, right? So for a land to be earmarked as a forest, it should be at least 1 hectare of area, a minimum 10% canopy of green cover, comprising of trees which are beyond a height of 2 meters. It's only if these conditions are satisfied that area can be earmarked as a forest, right? So such kind of areas, have they seen an increase or have they seen a decrease? The latest survey says that we have seen an increase since 2021. It's a very, very small marginal increase. Probably I think it is just brought out so as to impress the forest minister that everything is good with the department, right? So very, very, very minuscule increase is what is being seen. And in some parts of India there has been a slight decrease. Especially there are 2 important parts where a decrease in forest cover was seen. One is what is called as the Western Ghats ecologically sensitive area, right? So you take the entire Western Ghats, some areas of that has been earmarked as Western Ghats ecologically sensitive area. By whom? I think 10 or 12 years back there was a high level committee chaired by the former ISRO chairman, whose name was Kasturi Rangan, right? So Kasturi Rangan panel had gone into the issues of Western Ghats. So they had gone into what are the reasons why the fragile ecosystem of Western Ghats is getting disturbed, right? So they went and did a lot of comprehensive study, and based on that, certain areas were notified as Western Ghats ecologically sensitive areas, which means that all activities are supposed to be very, very regulated. The priority would be to preserve the forests of those areas, and strangely it is in this area the net forest cover has seen a decrease. Maybe implementation issues are there, right? And similarly northeast as well, we have seen a reduction in forest areas. The reason is because a lot of forest land which was earlier forested, those areas were all now brought under rubber plantations, right? So we do see a decrease in forest cover in northeast states as well. So in northeast and in Western Ghats ecologically sensitive areas, we see a slight reduction. Okay, when it comes to state wise, which state has the highest forest cover? Among the states, first rank goes to Madhya Pradesh, second rank goes to Arunachal Pradesh, followed by Chhattisgarh, right? Madhya Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. This is with respect to forest cover. With respect to tree cover, you may ask me what is the difference between tree cover and forest cover. So you exclude, let's say you have calculated all the 1 hectare pockets, right? So which means you have taken account of all forest lands, because forest land means it fits into this category. Every land that does not fit into this category, let's say in an urban area you have a small patch where there is a tree cover, right, where there is a green canopy, even you have to include that also. Just that it is not forest land, but even there you have trees growing. So that is what is called as tree cover, apart from forest land, apart from this 1 hectare definition, right? So that is like 3.41% of the total area of India, total land mass. Okay, so tree cover is also significant. 3.41% of the total land also has tree cover outside these forest definition, right? So when it comes to tree cover, The state with the lowest tree cover would be Rajasthan. The state with the highest would be Mizoram, right? And when it comes to union territory, when it comes to combined ranking between states and union territory, the highest ranking would be to Andaman. But when it comes to states alone, Mizoram, right? So number 1 in India is Andaman, followed by Mizoram. The lowest would be Rajasthan, right, when it comes to tree cover, right? So this is all the important data you need to know from the second chapter on forest cover, because everything else is all technical details which is not necessary for you. You should only know that the forest cover has seen a slight increase. So forest cover is around 21.76%, right? Forest, tree and scrubland. Scrubland is where you have rocky patches and then you have shrubs, small trees growing, correct? So when you include all of that, probably the number would go something around 26%, right? So green cover, there is a 26% green cover across all parts of India. Out of that, forest cover is 21.76, and the state with the highest forest cover, Madhya Pradesh. State with the lowest tree cover, Rajasthan. State and union territory with the highest tree cover, Andaman, Mizoram, right? So just some facts from chapter 2. Chapter 3 is an update on mangroves, the status of mangroves and its conservation in India, right? So you can find that mangroves in India are in almost in all the coastal states, right? In all the coastal states you have mangroves. Basically mangroves are salt resistant plants which actually grow, which actually emerge, which actually grow in shorelines, right? Shorelines where fresh water, sea water, they both meet. Those are the areas where mangroves tend to flourish, okay? In India, which state has the highest percentage of mangroves? It's West Bengal, right? As per the latest survey report of 2023, the mangrove cover, highest cover is in West Bengal, which is followed by Gujarat, followed by Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha. So that is the order, right? You don't have to know for all the states, just the first state alone you should know. West Bengal has higher for mangrove cover than Gujarat. That's an important point to be observed here. Secondly, in Gujarat alone, we have seen a net decrease in mangrove areas, okay? So this can also be asked as a question. All these kind of trends can be asked, especially if a report has been published. So I expect at least one question to be asked from the entire forest report, and there are multiple chapters. So I have made an attempt to cover 3 chapters in today's discussion right now, right? The second chapter, third and fourth. First chapter is simply an introduction. It's just an overview of the entire text, right? So second, third and fourth is what I have attempted to cover, taken some important facts, right? So this ranking is something that you can keep in your mind, right? West Bengal is number 1, Gujarat is number 2, okay? So they may ask any kind of facts. They may ask Maharashtra has more mangrove cover than Tamil Nadu, or Karnataka has more mangrove cover than Kerala, right? So all these kind of factual play UPSC can do. If possible, you try to remember it. Even if not, at least remember the top 2, lowest 2, right? Something can come to your help on the day of your examination, okay? And the third chapter on mangroves also has some interesting details on comparison across the globe. What it compares is that the percentage of land under mangrove cover is actually highest in Indonesia in the world, which is followed by Australia. Third comes India, okay? Whereas when it comes to the number of species in the mangroves in the respective countries, India stands at the highest, followed by Australia, okay? So when it comes to India, there are some 4,000 plus species of animals, birds that you actually find in the mangroves in India, okay? So when it comes to the total biodiversity that is found in mangroves, India leads even beyond Australia. So that's a question what I have framed here. So you can see here question number 3, right? India has higher area of land under mangroves than Australia, which is actually incorrect. India has higher biodiversity in its mangroves than Australia. That is right. So 2 only is the right answer, right? So this is how a question will be framed, just because a report has been published, okay? It is better to go through the report. So do it at your own initiative. Okay, so this is an important data which is really exam worthy, which can be asked, right? So for a general discussion on mangroves, you know what are its benefits, right? Mangroves are excellent breakwaters of cyclones when it comes and attacks the when it comes and it destroys the coastline, right? Mangroves are very good shelter, they are good breakwaters, okay? And mangroves, they provide excellent ecosystem services. They are very good breeding grounds for various species of fishes, right? And they are excellent source of carbon sequestration. In fact, among the forest types in India, it is the mangrove forest which has the highest rate of absorbing the atmospheric carbon and keeping it trapped in its roots, right? No other forest does sequestration as effective as mangroves, okay? And mangroves are very good source of minor forest produce. Honey collection is done from these mangrove forests. Fodder, very valuable source of fodder, mangrove forests, right? So they have a lot of ecological, economic services, and with respect to tourism, mangroves are excellent spots for nature tourism, right? There are so many rides and water safaris that are all organized in the middle of all these mangrove forests. So that way as well, mangroves have a good economic significance to contribute, right? So I will just give this as an assignment. If you are watching this video until this point, so give me 3 points on MISTI. First, what is its full form? Second, is it a centrally sponsored scheme or not? And if so, what is the funding breakdown? How much is center's share? How much is state's share? And thirdly, what is the convergence system? There is a convergence method of implementation of MISTI, right? So tell me, read the MISTI details and tell me what is the idea of convergence that is mentioned in the MISTI project, okay? So these are the 3 assignment. If in case you are watching this video till here, maybe you can just type it in the comment box, right? So give me the full form of MISTI. What type of a scheme is it? Is it exclusively a central scheme or is it a centrally sponsored scheme, right? And if so, what is the nature of funding between center and states? And lastly, what is the convergence method that is actually mentioned in MISTI scheme, right? So these are some of the assignments that you can carry out. And lastly, the 4th chapter in the forest report basically talks about forest fires, talks about different causes of forest fires, right? And especially this is a year where we have seen a very deadly forest fire in USA. So there is a possibility that this chapter can become useful for UPSC in framing questions, right? So the report basically talks about different causes of forest fire across different parts of India. In the northeast, the main culprit for forest fire is shifting cultivation, where those tribals, they just shift from one place to the other, and when they want to occupy a new area and when they want to start cultivation, they feel lazy. They cannot cut each and every plant and every weed. What they do is they just simply light fire to the entire area, right? And that fire starts spreading to all neighboring forests, right? So that's one of the reason for forest fires, as mentioned in the chapter. In the northeast region, this is the culprit, okay? Whereas in central India, like Odisha, Jharkhand, I'll tell you, the main reason for forest fire there is because of people getting into the forest for collection of non-timber forest produce. I'll give you an example. In states like Odisha, Jharkhand, people go to the forests to collect a flower called as mahua flower, right? So it's a yellowish color of flower, and this flower basically after it actually falls down on the ground. So when you look into the forest region, you have flowers, but flowers are just covered with so much of debris. Basically it's the dry leaves of the mahua plant which has all fallen down and has covered all the flowers, right? It is very, very difficult to go and search where is the flower. So what do these tribals do? When they go to the forest, they simply light fire to all the dry leaves, because when the fire burns, after that the flower will be left intact, right? Flower doesn't catch fire, whereas leaves, they all easily they combust, and immediately the ash will all be removed, and finally they can spot the flowers easily, right? So this is a customary practice in central India, as a result of which forest fires happen. So this fact is also pointed out by the State of Forest report regarding forest fires. When it comes to Western Himalayan region, the main culprit there is during the summer season, pine trees, they shed a lot. They shed their leaves, and the leaves after falling down, they become very, very dry. When they become extremely dry, it's so easy that even the leaves, when they rub against each other, they tend to catch fire easily, right? So the pine forests in Western Himalayan region, the drying of the leaves over there, the shedding of the leaves is a real reason for forest fires in those parts, right? And in Western India, in Gujarat, Rajasthan, those areas, very dry area. So whatever grasslands that you have over there, as the grasses become drier and drier, it becomes easily combustible, and with wind blowing, when they rub against each other, the chances of fire getting sparked is very, very high, right? So this is all mentioned as important facts in the first 3 chapters of India State of Forest report. All right. So we'll continue in the same format in the upcoming environment lectures, where we discuss about some species in particular, some order of species. Then we discuss about other issues, like for instance, maybe in the next class we'll take up some international conventions and national level laws. We'll try to discuss aspects regarding that, and we'll try to also cover the remaining chapters of State of Forest report. Right. So I hope it was useful, and if it's useful, do share this video to your friends and to your peers. All right. So thank you.